Welcome to the Security Champion Podcast. My name is Michael Birch. I'm your host, and today I am joined with Roger A. Grimes. Now, if you're a frequent listener, you understand the fact that I don't like to introduce people. I like people to tell me about their security journey. So, Roger, tell me what brought you to do what you're doing today.
That is kind of a long story. So when I describe myself, I've got the big long bio and all this stuff, and I'm working on my 16th book and written over 1,500 cybersecurity articles. So I have this big, huge bio. I just like to tell people I've been doing cybersecurity for 36 years, written a lot of books, written a lot of articles, and I've done a lot of different roles. I'm currently the data-driven Defense Evangelist for KnowBe4, and it's almost like not a job. It's like my favorite job ever. I've been with KnowBe4 for 7 years, and all I do is speak and write. I have no responsibilities. Literally, I cannot believe how much I love my life. But I started out. I guess my cybersecurity journey started in 1987. I got my first. I was at college. I got an IBM PC to help me write papers or something like that. And at first, I remember I'd spent $2,500 and I was super bored. But somehow, very quickly, I not only got excited about computers and how they work. I remember watching like a disk defragger and it was moving the sectors around, and something that electrified my mind. Somehow that led to Apple and DOS boot viruses. And really quickly, I started researching computer viruses and hackers and malware. And within a year or two, I was actually disassembling DOS viruses for John McAfee, rest in peace. This is before the days of the internet. Computer viruses actually had to spread using disk, and they still were able to get around the world pre-internet days. And this was back in the days when it wasn't even, they were so rare kind of that even a popular magazine columnist, PC Magazine columnist John Dorvac back then said computer viruses are fake. He wrote a whole column on it, and I was working with them, so that was really, I was like, oh, okay, people don't know this. But I had been pre-med. I was a paramedic. I've been a lot of things. Lifeguard. I was a paramedic. I was one of the youngest paramedics in the United States. I did that. I was going to be pre-med. And then my grades weren't great in all the core classes. I got to organic chemistry and I went, I'm out of here. But I was being a paramedic, and all the doctors I was meeting was like, you should go get your MBA. So I switched to a business major because they're like, socialized medicine's taking over. Doctors are going to make any money, which I laugh. That was like 40 years ago, right? And doctors are still making plenty of money. We're still not to socialized medicine, but. So I switched to business. I said, I want to take something hard. I took accounting. Turned out it was very hard, and I really didn't like it, but I graduated with a degree. I had a decent grade average. I made all A's and B's first couple of years, but I think I barely lived through the last year. But I took the CPA exam, and I passed it. I can't believe that. I don't know how that happened. But I went to an accounting firm. I started working, and I was, Mike, the worst accountant that has ever been on planet Earth. Somehow, I had taken the major, passed the exam, and I really didn't understand, or like accounting. And I literally, I'm not making this up. I was there for 10 months. I took every single thing they gave me, and I didn't complete it. I even had this drawer. I knew there was a drawer in my desk that had no back to it, and when I put stuff in there, stuff would fall into the desk, inside the desk, where you couldn't retrieve them. And that's where I put all the tax returns they gave me and all the corporate auditing. Everybody there hated me. I hated them because I was just asking too many questions. And at the same time, I was really, really getting into computers, really getting into tracking hackers and malware. I was disassembling early malware. I was reading about hackers, really finding that to be an exciting thing. That was really energizing me. And when the computer guys came around, I was really into that. I was just, I was on the internet and what was called FidoNet, which is dial-up BBS thing. And again, working with John McAfee across the world at night, disassembling these viruses. And I remember the partners at the accounting firm said, hey, Roger, we want to talk to you about something tomorrow, which I knew was, when the partners asked to talk to you in an accounting firm, it's either because you're being promoted or you're being fired. And I'd done nothing that was going to get me promoted. So that morning I was sitting there all nervous, and then the phone rang, and it ended up being one of those partners that was supposed to be in the meeting, and he had lost a balance sheet spreadsheet at a customer site, and the spreadsheet was needed for this $5 million bank loan. Could I fix it? They knew that I was a computer guy in my head, and so I showed up and I fixed it. There's celebration, there's champagne, and I literally decided that I'm in the wrong career. I literally so I go back to the office. And the partners see it too. They're like, man, maybe this computer thing could be something. And they're like, hey, we were going to fire you, but we see this computer thing may be something. And this is like 1989. And they said, we'd like you to head our computer firm or something. And I went, I'm in the wrong place. I quit. I'm giving you my 2 weeks notice. And they literally said, you're fired. You have wasted 10 months of our time. They called a security guard to walk me to my desk to collect my pictures. I had a wife and new baby at home, and I was thinking about, oh my God, I got to call them and tell them I've been fired, or I quit or whatever. And I was making, at the time, $29,000, as a staff accountant. And I was like, I got nothing. Oh my God. The phone rang, and it ended up being somebody from a computer company called ExecuTrain, and they were calling to get a reference because a secretary that had left the accounting firm said, can I use your reference? I said, yes. That phone rang, and I'm not a religious guy. As a matter of fact, I'm the opposite of a religious guy. But that phone rang right when I was being escorted by the security guard out of the building, and it rang. It was somebody from a computer firm. I made the lady laugh, and I literally walked out. She said, can you teach computers? I'm like, yes! And I didn't even know that, and I walked out to a better, higher-paying job. And then, so I taught computers at ExecuTrain. I did real well. Learned that I kind of had a knack for presenting and teaching and stuff like that. And I went around the world with them, and then I ended up doing, I went from there to like PC repair person, network technician, network manager, eventually became VP of IT in several places, regional VP of IT, executive vice president where I'm doing budgets. But the entire time during this journey, I was really not doing a great job at those jobs, and I was fighting hackers and malware. Like, I don't know how I didn't get fired, because I'm being paid, let's say as executive vice president, to do budgets and manage people and stuff. And I was doing that, but poorly. And really, with most of my time, I was fighting computer viruses and stuff. I remember like in 1992, that was the year of the Michelangelo virus, where it was crashing down on things. It was taking the computers down, millions of computers around the world. And I was in Newsweek magazine, and I remember some news crews from like ABC News were showing up. I was a network manager at this mortgage firm, and ABC News is coming in with like all these camera booms, and there's like 6 people, they're going to film me for this segment for ABC News. And I remember my boss, she was looking, she's like, what the heck is going on here? She thought she had this network manager. I'm on ABC, and I'm being in Newsweek magazine and everything. But I stayed in IT and stuff. I was always just concentrating on stuff. So eventually, somewhere around, I forget, 2000, 2001, I called my wife one day, and I was the executive VP of IT. I was making double 6 figures, making a ton of money, big house, big double pool in the house, kids going to private school, but I was miserable. And I told my wife, I'm going to quit this job and go do computer security full time, because that's really what I had been doing. And she kind of, back in the day, and you're going to laugh at this, but back then we weren't really sure it wasn't called computer security. There wasn't enough of a problem. And Kevin Mitnick had been arrested, and he was in jail, and John McAfee's antivirus virus scan product was finding most of the viruses and stuff. I mean, not all of it, but there seemed like at that point in time that it was almost like the cybersecurity problem was going to be solved, and we weren't sure if I was going to have a career at what I was going to do. But I remember saying, well, I think, even though we're doing a better job of finding them, in the future there's going to be a lot more computers, and so probably percentage-wise, just the way they work out, the numbers I'll be able to make a career. And I literally left that job, went to Foundstone, and started teaching Ultimate Hacking Expert, made a bunch of courses, Ultimate Hacking Windows Expert and stuff. I got the pen test, which I'd been doing for a lot of years, but that was definitely up my game. I was paired with a lot of I found out that I wasn't, on a scale of 1 to 10 for hacking, I broke into everything I was ever hired to hack, hundreds and hundreds of things, in 3 hours or less, usually an hour or less. And I thought I was the hot dude, in hacking. I found out that on a scale of 1 to 10, I was a 6, maybe. So, and then from there, I actually went to work. Foundstone got bought by McAfee Associates, funny enough. And then you could tell it was kind of being shut down, and all the good people were leaving. So I left, went to Microsoft, worked there for 11 years, kind of learned how to work cybersecurity at scale. And I found I kind of had a natural fit in that environment and traveled around the world. And then eventually, it's funny, at Microsoft, I was the first field cybersecurity person that was promoted to senior management. And again, remember, I'm not a good manager. and at the same time, it was weird. I was doing all these projects. I was putting in early MFA, a lot of PKI systems, a lot of intrusion detection stuff, firewalls. I'm doing cybersecurity for Microsoft and for our clients and something called ACE Team. I'm being accoladed, promoted, given huge bonuses for doing all this great stuff. And then I noticed that every one of my clients are still being compromised. And how? Social engineering mostly, and unpatched software. And I literally remember my last year or two being really depressed, telling my wife, so, let me tell this also. My number one goal in life is to make the internet a significantly more secure place to be. If I do that in my life, if I get rid of most hackers and malware, my life, professional life, and career will have been a success. If I don't do that before I retire in another 10 years, I will see my career as an utter failure. And I'm not making that up. I'm not here to do little things. I'm here to fix it all. And I was sitting there at Microsoft telling my wife, I'm like, man, they're all still being hacked. I thought I was helping them by putting in MFA and all these intrusions. But the hackers are just social engineering them and just, going through unpatched software, and they're still getting to them. And I literally looked up and found out there was like two major security awareness companies at the time. It was KnowBe4, and at the time it was called PhishMe, which actually had been made by a previous friend of mine and coworker named Aaron Higby. And I was thinking about both companies, and PhishMe was the number one at the time, and KnowBe4 was like a little ankle biter, as we call them today. But I could see that they were rising. If I looked at their Gartner Magic Quadrant reports, you could just see they were coming up. So I actually I knew the CEO, I'd interviewed him. I wrote for InfoWorld magazine for 15 years, 20 years probably, but I had my own security column for 15 years up until 2019. I talked to Stu, who's the CEO of KnowBe4, and I told him, hey, I told Stu, I said, I'm leaving Microsoft. I'm going to go start my own company. I'd written a book called Data-Driven Defense, which out of my 16, I consider my magnum opus. And I said, Stu, I'm going to leave Microsoft. I'm opening up my own company. I'd already incorporated a company in Florida called Data-Driven Defense. I'd already gotten the web address, Data-Driven Defense, or something like that. And Stu just said, why do you want all the hassle running your own company and having to worry about vacation and accounts payable and payroll? Just come work for me and do the same thing. And somehow, I don't know. I'd previously run my own company, and accounts payable, receivable, people didn't pay, and that was in my head. And I remember, I don't know, Mike, if you've ever had your own company, you go on vacation and you think you have everything settled, but it seems like every crisis happens when you're on vacation. The people you pick to select it aren't handling it, and you don't really even get to take a vacation, and your family's mad at you because you've promised them you're going to take. So anyways, I was like, Stu, I am in. And so I've been with KnowBe4 for 7 years. It's been the best relationship. I've done my best work. I probably write 2 or 3 articles a week at least that I post on LinkedIn. I literally just get to do what I want to do. They hardly tell me to do anything, and I just love KnowBe4. It really has been a good relationship and partnership. I wish everybody in the world gets to have an employer that values them and allows them to do their best work, as I have, which is I'm 58. I'm kind of in the older part of my career, and I got to say it's kind of cool, and I also feel fortunate and lucky that it just happened to me.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. That's it's touching so many great points across the history of security there. Like the first thing you brought up that like immediately tone hit me is the idea that my kids will never have to actually like debug a hard drive where oh man, it's running slow. I gotta go watch it reorganize all the boxes for 10 minutes. They'll have no idea what that was like. Right?
DOS debug box and put in something like debug C800 G5 or something like that, and that would initiate a low-level format. Or the modem tones. Don't they still haunt you?
Oh, yeah.
And you go, oh, I don't think it's connecting. That sounds like it's not gonna connect at my 2400 baud speed. It sounds like it went lower to 1200.
But that's amazing. It's actually, and I love that. So one of my favorite things about when I get to interview people and talk to them about like their backgrounds is I have never, 99% of the people I talk to, a lot of people in these really successful positions that have done really well through tech and security and everything else, almost none of them come up to me and be like, oh, knew I was going to do security. I went and took a computer science degree. I immediately got security and I went and got a security job, and that's all I've been doing. I almost never hear that, right? It's always, I was doing this and it came out of nowhere. Or I was doing something else and I started working a little with computers and then I couldn't put it down, right? That is very much the world that I see it in.
That's exactly what happened. I actually, not a smart guy. I'm still not super smart. I'm just hardworking. But I did notice that I really had a passionate love for fighting hackers. And when I was doing it, whether I was trying to defend against them or I was trying to figure out what they did or how to stop them or whatever, that I did seem to have a natural ability to figure out things quicker than other people in the room. Like I can't sing, I can't dance, I can't draw, I'm not good at math, blah 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 blah. But I was like, if you have a hacking incident going on, I'm a really good guy to have in any room. Like that I was like, that's the one brag point that I can have, is that somehow I have this ability to naturally kind of figure things out in that world and fighting hackers, and the job found me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Being an evangelist, I'm curious, because I always think about where do I end up, right? And I enjoy, I love the talking scene. I love talking about security, being on those different places. Evangelism, that takes years and years and years of experience for having good evangelists in the company, right? What's that lifestyle like? Writing, reading, you're kind of touching on some of those points. I think we met at a conference, right? I'm assuming you get to go to all the different conferences, do a lot of different talks. Definitely, what's that kind of perspective for you as kind of an end career goal for someone that's in security?
Yeah, the best job ever. Everybody should get that job. It's literally so fun. It's almost like not a job. But let me say, there were evangelists at Microsoft when I was there, and they didn't really work hard and they didn't do a good job. But even then, I was like, oh, I'd like to be this evangelist, a guy that goes to conferences and talks. And our evangelists at Microsoft did such a bad job that Microsoft got rid of them all. And they were on my career trajectory chart, so it was not a good thing that they got rid of the job I was trying to get to. But at KnowBe4, they really did it well. And they're not. I don't say this to Perry Carpenter. He's one of the early evangelists, leader of the evangelist, and co-worker, smart guy, great presenter. I love how he described the job. He says, your job is to sell everything at KnowBe4 but the product. Your job is to sell trust in KnowBe4. Your job is to be seen as a thought leader and to make people trust that you really care about them and their problems. And so it's kind of funny, every once in a while somebody will ask me to talk about our product. And I kind of know our product, but I'm not the guy you need to be speaking to. You need to be speaking to a salesperson that lives and breathes the product. I'm not that guy. I'm not even sure how to get into our product, right? So evangelist is really, it's selling trust, if you could describe it any other way. And we have the largest evangelist team, I'm sure, of any cybersecurity firm. We're much larger than evangelist teams at Google and Microsoft. There's 11 of us, or at one point there's maybe 15, and we have them around the world and that sort of stuff. Again, it's to sell trust, and we talk about everything. I talk about quantum, and how to protect yourself against quantum attacks. I talk about just all kinds of things, and anything that I want to talk about, browser site help, Trojans, and hacking and different types of hacking. It's pretty cool. And really what it kind of is that you get invited to go speak to companies and conferences. Although, we laugh, it's not always Black Hat and RSA. Probably our general thing is, hey, we'd like you to come to the American Industrial Sighting Association. Can you come to the Midwest Tractors Investors Association? There's a lot of names you've never heard of, but they're fantastic smaller conferences. And then we get invited to companies, we're companies large and small, militaries, different countries, we get invited to. And I will say that we kind of do get to pick where we want to go, what we want to do, and travel. Sometimes in my career, sometimes I felt more like traveling, sometimes less like traveling. Sometimes I wanted to travel more internationally, and I was able to take myself and my wife around the world. We've been to, I don't know, 20, 30 countries together, and I've been able to, use, hey, they're paying for the flight in my room. Would you like to come along? My wife would tell you that she would love to go somewhere where I'm not working. A real vacation, but we've gone to France and Germany and the Middle East and just all over the place. I think we're going to Alaska this year, just to kind of worked into it, and Canada a couple times, and Colorado, and but I would say like I'm not. I do have like George Clooney in that film, his traveling film. I do have some of the black cards that you earn by being on the road all the time. Like I have a Marriott Platinum Lifetime Elite, which gives me access to the elite stuff at Marriott, and I don't have to earn it anymore. But that was at Microsoft. I was traveling every week. But these days, as an evangelist, I would say at the worst, I'm traveling a third of my life.
Yeah.
Which it could sound like a lot or not a lot. So mostly I'm traveling. I'm writing all the time. I'm meeting people. I'm coming up with ideas. Like my 16th book I'm working on now is how agentic AI and quantum is going to impact cybersecurity threats in the future. And that literally came out of my head, and then I've made it into a presentation. I'm writing a book on it. And I talked to Stu and my boss Kathy. I'm like, hey, is it all right if I go off and do this thing? They're like, yeah, and they're all on board, backing what I'm doing, and that's how it generally happens. Like I come up with an idea. It's a rarity they'll say don't do it, or I think maybe once or twice Stu's looked at something and I'm not sure if that's really a great topic. And let me say, he's usually right. Most of the time, like, yeah, no, they're on board and they're supporting. So it's a fantastic job, Mike. If you want to, even if you don't want to travel, you can do Zoom calls. And October's our busiest month. That's kind of like Cybersecurity Awareness Training Month. That books up 6 to 9 months out. And that can get busy. We can end up like doing 3 Zoom calls a day. Matter of fact, they kind of cut back on how much they make us work in October, just because we're doing 3 to 5 calls a day. Your voice gets hoarse, day after day. But no, dream job, man. Just dream job. You're trying to help people.
That's amazing. That's awesome. All right, I think we've gotten through the kind of introduction, understand your background, what you're doing now, and I love that you've brought up quantum, because I think that's a great place to kick off the core of our conversation. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick 30-second break, go to get a word from our sponsors, and then we'll come back and deep dive.
How do you create security champions? Security Journey is the solution most adopted to provide application security education to help developers become security champions and produce safer applications. Security Journey training content extends beyond developers to reach the entire SDLC, creating a security-first organization. Learn more about our enterprise security training at securityjourney.com.
All right, welcome back to the Security Champions podcast. I'm Michael Birch, your host. I'm joined with Roger Grimes, and we're going to be discussing, or at least starting by discussing, quantum computing and the security implications. Before we dive into all this stuff like quantum cryptography and the current type of problems that are going to arise as quantum gets better, I think the best way to start this conversation, Rogers, is what is quantum computer? Why is it so different than traditional computing methods?
I got to tell you, I think anytime anyone starts hearing about quantum, if it's your first time or your 20th time, your brain will start to hurt. As a matter of fact, I remember the day when I finally understood quantum well, and I started running around my house, jumping and celebrating, and telling my wife. And my wife's like, "What do you?" I was like, "I understand quantum. I understand quantum." And let me say, I'm just a quantum hobbyist, which means I don't have to do the math. But so quantum, when you hear quantum means typically quantum physics in some way, and or quantum mechanics, and they're kind of one and the same terms. And what it is that it's a different way of understanding our world. It is the way that all of our world works. Absolutely everything. Sometimes you hear there's these 2 different worlds. There's this tiny quantum world at the subatomic level. It operates one way, and then when we're at the larger world above atoms and larger, it operates another classical. That's all some imaginary bunk that people made up. It's all one world. We're all quantum. Everything is quantum. Everything here is just quantum. We just haven't figured it all out yet. But what happened is, like, if you look at what's called classical physics, it's this idea that we can measure and see and know everything, called deterministic physics, meaning that, like, if I have a rock and I'm going to throw that rock, and I tell you how much the rock weighs, what force, what angle, what the weather is, and that sort of stuff, that you and every other physicist, scientist can not only can tell you where that rock's going to be during its path when you release it. Oh, it'll be here, and they can tell you before you even throw the rock. You don't even have to throw the rock, but they'll tell you exactly where it's going to land and tumble and that sort of stuff. So that was known as, a lot of stuff was solved by that. But then Einstein and a couple others at the turn of the 19th century, in the 1900s. As a matter of fact, Albert Einstein's only Nobel Prize, which is in physics, was because he was one of the early kind of discoverers of quantum physics. And although what he discovered, and he and his friends discovered, was so startling to what we thought was reality that he started to say, I don't believe it, it can't be real. And he was wrong, and ended up being what he thought couldn't be true was true. And so you have all these quantum properties and descriptions, and they're so weird with the way that we kind of see each other and understand things that it's hard to believe that it is that way. And just to give you just kind of a couple of quantum properties, as we call them, and there's dozens and dozens of quantum properties. But if any two quantum particles ever touch and in what we call entangle, if they touch each other, they become entangled. And quantum particles are anything subatomic, smaller, so that would be like electrons, photons, the smallest piece of light, quarks, which are things that make up protons and neutrons. There's all these elementary particles, they're called, that are quantum particles. Everything at the elementary particle level, we can see it operating in this quantum way. But one of the things is entanglement, and this is the one that Einstein had the worst time with. He said, hey, if any two quantum particles entangle with each other, quantum physics says that they're going to, and after, any quantum particles moving at nearly the speed of light. They're happening trillions of connections and entanglements a second. It's the most natural thing in the world. You couldn't stop it if you tried, or we have a hard time stopping it. They go away, and then these particles could be across the universe, or possibly even in other universes. And if one of them has a behavior, or is measured to have a particular setting, all the other entangled particles will have the same setting or action. So if you measure, in the quantum world, they say, well, this thing has right polarization, which means it's moving in the right angle or whatever. All the other entangled particles will also at that moment have that exact same measurement. So, and that's called entanglement. So they meet, and forever they kind of become one system, and it's everything trillions of times happening every second. And they will forever impact the other. And this includes you and I looking at each other right now over Zoom. We are entangling with each other. The electrons and everything are going through the pathway. The electrons are coming and entering my optic nerve here and going into, into my brain and interacting with electrons and things like that inside of your brain. But it's all entangled, and they're forever. What's in you is entangled with what's in me, and we're forever tangled forevermore, as long as those particles are entangling with each other. And people go, oh my God, there must be some romantic thing where we're entangled with each other. Unfortunately, you're also entangling with your desk and the wall and the floor and the coffee pot and the concrete as you drive along the day, But it's funny. So Einstein said, there's just no way that sort of stuff is true. That there is this entangled state, and what we see looks like something that it looks like they're behaving with each other, but they must have, when they collided, shared something. And then later on, when we measure them, we're seeing that outcome, and that's why we think that they're moving together. So he literally spent the last couple decades of his life saying this cannot be true, that these things, when they touch, forever entangled forevermore and react with each other. But it turned out he was wrong, and before he died, he actually created an experiment that could prove or disprove whether this entanglement thing really was real. He died before we could implement it, but in the 70s, this college PhD guy said he read about Einstein's experiment, and he realized that he could create and replicate the experiment. Now, finally, many decades later, he does do the experiment. Let me say, when he does the experiment, and it's essentially, if you ever see it described, it's called Bell's inequality. It will look. They always describe it as pool balls, billiard balls. You're shooting billiard balls, and the billiard ball could go right or left. And if quantum is not true and there's no entanglement, there's going to be like this 50-50 split to the right or the left, right? Just because of the way deterministic physics is. But if entanglement is true, then it's going to be like a 70-30 split or a 67-37 split. And so Bell, PhD Bell, does this experiment. He thinks that Einstein's right and that this experiment's it's going to be 50-50. It doesn't. It completely supports quantum physics. And now it's been one of the most proven things in the world. Let me give you one more example, just the weirdness of quantum physics, though. And I love this one. I have it in my book. I wrote a book on this whole quantum thing called Cryptography Apocalypse in 1990 or 2019 or 2020. But I say you go out with your loved one, go out at the night, look at a starry sky, and see the stars. Well, classical physics will tell you that the light, the photon that's part of the light that comes into your eye, had to leave that star back when the star was somewhere else. It takes, time, sometimes years, sometimes hundreds of millions of years, but let's just say years, for the light to travel from that star and enter your eye and your pupil and interact. And classical physics will tell you that star isn't really where you see it. That's where the star was when the photon left the star. What quantum physics says, and this is just extraordinarily weird, is that because you at the moment looked up and saw that photon, it changed the path of that photon when it left the star years ago. And that's something proven through what's called the Double-Slit experiments. Mm-hmm. But so the only way that we can describe it is it appears something we're doing today is changing and impacting something that happened in the past. But the truth is that's not what's happening. We are like the Aztec Indians in the 1400s when the Spanish conquistadors showed up and they hadn't seen horses or iron or guns, and they described these Spaniard conquistadors that were going to kill them all and enslave them as gods with plates of iron and spears that spit fire, right? And they just didn't understand guns and gunpowder. Well, that's where we are right now with quantum physics. We actually know it's all real. It's been proven. It's one of the most proven sciences in the entire world. But when we describe it, we describe these weird things because we're the Aztecs. We don't know how to describe it, but 10, 20, 30 years from now, our kids and grandkids will figure it out like we figured out gravity, and they'll just describe it and it'll just be the way everything works. It won't be weird. It would be that we had it wrong, like we were talking about vapors in the ether, causing illness or something like that. Our kids will just be taught this is the way physics is. There is going to be two types of physics. There'll be one type of physics, quantum physics, and this is how it works, and this is what it causes, and maybe there's 100 billion universes to make this thing pull off, but it's not going to be strange. It's going to be the most normal thing that these kids talk about with each other because it's the way the world works.
I myself think myself as a hobbyist in physics on the rare occasion. One of my favorite concepts, and it go along all these different weird things, is how the theory behind how we use quantum mechanics to smell. I don't know if you've heard this one. It's basically so this is a great one. So this is quantum tunneling, which is kind of the idea that an electron can kind of pass through something in a way that it just doesn't make sense to us in normal physics, right? Because it goes through it like it's just not there, right? It just goes through it, right?
Classical physics said this should not work. It should not be able to get to where it's going because it doesn't have enough power at the angle or whatever.
Right, but it still does. It works. And so the theory is a good example of why can similar same shaped molecules that hit a receptor, and actually the whole idea behind this is we don't have enough receptors to smell all the things we smell. So how do we smell them? So the original idea is kind of key and lock. You have a molecule, it's like a key, and it fits into a lock, and that's why I smell it. But it's actually what they think, and that's been proven is that, or I'm going to call it theory because I'm not the scientist, I just know about it, that when it locks in, the two different molecules can lock in the same way. And what happens is we actually tunnel an electron through it, and it's like strumming a string, because the rest of the shape, the lock-in part might be the same shape, but the rest of the shape of the molecule is different. When you quantum tunnel through it, it's going to have a different vibration. And that's what allows us to tell the difference between similarly shaped molecules and receptors. Why are they different? Why do they smell different? Well, we're plucking them like a string on a guitar by tunneling an electron through it, right? Like all these different things of the way that like it's just all in us, right? It's all of our daily natural processes, and we go through longer in our life, we'll understand more how it actually evolved with us and impacts the way that we operate, right? I think it's actually interesting. Bring it back to the quantum computing side, though. One of the things that, and this might be my only real understanding of how quantum computers work, is one of the biggest advantages is in a traditional computer system, I work in the world of binary, right? I work in zeros and ones. And when we leave to go to quantum computing, we get to ignore zeros and ones, and we get to have multiple states per a given set of some stored data, right? And that's where, and that's just my most naive understanding of how that actually works. But one of the things that I think that comes into that, the more power. If I can save more than one state, what can I process? What can I do? All these other type of things.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So yeah, in the binary, traditional classical binary computer world, which is everything, which by the way, only works because of quantum physics. It only works because of quantum physics, but the way that we look at information, that we store and operate information, is binary, meaning I have this classical bit, and it can be a 1 or a 0, but when we use it, it has to be a 1 or a 0. So it can be one of two states, but at any one time it's only going to have one state. And the quantum bit world, qubit world, and we take our quantum particle, again, electron, photon, usually going to be an electron or a photon, and it has all these different ways you can measure it. Is it going right? Is it going left? Is it going up? Is it going down? What's its color? There's all these quantum properties that you can say, well, if it's this way, if it's turning right, we'll say it's a 1. If it's turning left, we'll say that it's a 0 or something like that. But one of the traits about quantum particles is that why it's in its quantum state, and it's not entangled with a bunch of other things we don't want it to entangle with, it is actually all states all the time. So we talk about it like, hey, a quantum particle can be a 1 or a 0. Really, it is a 1, a 0, a 1, and a 0, and really, it's everything. Any possible number of answers that thing could be is what it is. So a quantum bit, at the very least, the way that we measure it is, well, that quantum bit could be a 1 or a 0, or a 1 and a 0 at the same time. The reality is it actually can be more than that. There could be 4 states, 10 states, 60 states. And so it allows each qubit to proportionally, exponentially store a lot more information. And how much more information? We think that if you give us like 80 qubits that are appropriately entangled and isolated so you're not getting unwanted entanglements, that you can store all digital information ever created on planet Earth to this day in 80 qubits. Because it's just so exponentially more powerful.
That's mind-boggling. That's so non-traditional to the way that we just imagine it in that traditional computer science sense.
Yeah, and Google today just said, hey, we think we're 5 years away from having useful quantum computers. But the whole reason you and I are probably on this podcast is in 1994, a quantum physicist, scientist, mathematician named Peter Shor in 1994 said, hey, we didn't have quantum computers. We didn't have any qubits yet. He said, but hey, if you give me these qubit things that have where their states are all the states at the same time, when they're in the quantum states, if you give me that, it gives me a little trick. And I can break most of today's traditional, classical, asymmetric encryption. Asymmetric encryption, typically for us, let's say, there's different, I'm simplifying here. You take 2 prime numbers, let's say like 5 times 3, and it gives me 15. The idea is that if I make those numbers 1,000 digits big, prime numbers, and I multiply them together, I can give you one of them, and sometimes even 2 of them, and it's very difficult for you to figure out. Computationally, there's not enough there's not enough energy in the known universe for a classical computer to figure out what is that other prime number. So again, it's like I give you 15 and 5, and you're supposed to figure the other one's 3. But if you make it 1,000 digits big, classical computers have no way of. There's just not enough energy in the universe. They're not going to be able to shortcut the math. But Peter Shor in 1994 said, "Hey, if you give me these quantum bits, think about it. We go from playing chess to maybe like Star Trek chess, where you have 5 levels or something." He's like, "If you give me these additional attributes, quantum attributes, I think I can solve that like in a minute." So he announces this in 1994. People back it up. We get our first quantum computers from IBM in 1999, 2000. They eventually only get like 2 qubits, and the first thing they do is take Peter Shor's algorithm, and that's what they factor. They factor 5 and 3 into 15. Like, holy, it works! It works! They weren't breaking any big crypto, but they went, the math works. This guy's algorithm was real. Since that day, I remember it being written about, and I'd read about Peter Shor's algorithm in 1994. Then I read about, oh my God, it's backed up in 1999. I started paying attention, learning quantum physics, following it. So every day since 1994, we've been waiting for the day when we have sufficiently capable quantum computers that are able to break today's asymmetric encryption, RSA, Diffie-Hellman, Elgamal, elliptic curve cryptography. Essentially, 90% of the world's information is protected by this. Your Wi-Fi router works using it. Your password's protected by it. Your multi-factor authentication uses it. Your Visa card. People go, "Hey, does this mean that they can crack Bitcoin?" Yes, but let me tell you what. They're going to be able to crack the international banking system and every Visa transaction. Cryptocurrency is a tiny, tiny part of that. We're going to have much bigger problems. So since then, there's been this race that we have this quantum susceptible cryptography. Again, mostly asymmetric, but it actually impacts symmetric cryptography, AES, and other things as well. You have to double your key size to get the same protection. But it's easy. I go from AES 128 to AES 256, and I'm protected. Easy stuff. Asymmetric stuff has to be replaced. And so NIST created a contest, National Institute of Standards and Technology, a bunch of years ago, probably been 8 years ago, 10 years ago, created a post-quantum cryptography contest and said, hey, these traditional classical asymmetric algorithms, once we get sufficiently capable quantum computers, they're going to be able to break it. We need to have post-quantum cryptography. And that just means traditional binary regular math. It's not quantum. It's just regular binary classical bits that are able to resist the Peter Shor quantum attack if we have sufficiently capable quantum computers. And so they put it out there, like 80 people, teams of PhDs submitted 80 algorithms. Over the next year, they said, I think they got it down to like 33 or 20. And finally, a couple of years ago, they actually picked the first 5 finalists, which I always loved. Some of the finalists, they're named Crystal Kyber and Crystal, but they're named after things from Star Wars and Star Trek. Crystal Kyber and Crystal Dilithium. That's it. So I love that. And there's some other ones that got picked. And just recently, they actually picked just yet another one, which was good because the other 4 or 5 that they picked were all based upon the same type of math, which is called lattice, the hard problem of lattices. And so a bunch of cryptographers are trying to break it. So NIST said, well, we need to have post-quantum crypto that is not based on the same math. And so they just recently selected one that was called HQC, and that used a different type of math. And so we now have these algorithms, and all companies are getting ready to do a massive multi-year migration of every bit of software, hardware, and firmware you have to post-quantum algorithms. That is happening, and it has to be, per the government, done before 2030, that 5 years from now. I think that's drastically too late. I think that we're making sufficient quantum headline, or advance that we could already not, the U.S. government or China, those 2 main quantum crypto people, one of those could have already broken it, have sufficiently capable quantum computers, and we just don't know it. Unless it's hidden or something. And I'm one of the few people that believe that, but I think there's a 15% chance the U.S. government or China has broken it. the crypto, what they call Q Day. Some people call it Q Day. But if not, the U.S. government says we need to be prepared by 2030. And so this is going to be a multi-year migration. The U.S. government's been saying you need to do this for like 10 years already. When I ask people, I give these speeches on quantum, I go, who here is doing quantum preparation? Out of 100 people, I get 4 hands. And out of those 4 hands, I go, okay, out of you 4 guys, how many people you actually have a quantum project where you've assigned a resource leader and you have resources assigned to this project? All their hands go down.
You know, the you say this, right, and it's like 5 years. We should be able to have it done. I mean, we've been supposed to be doing security things and updating things for the last 2 decades that you still see in production environments. Like I'm sorry to say, the idea that I think the industry could update all their stuff to match this, the tech might be there, but even with the tech there, I can't imagine what that actually looks like. I think we were talking a little ahead of this talk, and you brought up like a Y2K kind of correlation. That's what I see. I'm like, this thing hits, and it's like there's going to be a huge part of the industry that it doesn't matter how much the government says, how much regulation's out there, it's going to be affected.
Yeah, you know, the U.S. government, I think, made a mistake because like 10 years or 5 years ago, they went, you need to be ready by 2030. I'm like, oh my God, they gave a 10-year deadline to a major critical problem. This is a problem because today we're worried about ransomware, password stealing Trojans, eavesdropping. Like, we all have all this stuff on our plate, and the U.S. government just told us we have 10 years to deal with this other problem. I was like, that virtually guarantees nobody's going to do anything.
2029, that's when they'll start.
Yeah, so yeah, really. And here, you ready for the wild thing? The last executive order that Joe Biden put out of the White House told the U.S. government, you need to prepare ASAP. You need to convert your networks to post-quantum cryptography ASAP. And I think I'm the only one in the world that went, hey, they were saying 2030. Now this guy, and let me say, I don't think Joe Biden knows anything about post-quantum cryptography. You know, I think some people told him, you need to put in this executive order and make it so we can tell all the government agencies they need to get, and it said ASAP, as soon as practically possible. I'm like, somebody knows something that they're not telling us, because it used to be, take your time, you've got years, and all of a sudden it's like, soon as practically possible. People, I think he's saying the same, a lot of people, I think he's saying the same thing. No. They don't say things casually, and it just got stuck in the middle of the EO, the executive order, in the middle of, like, you know, other stuff. I'm like, it's just too weird that sentence is in there, and everyone's like, take your time. And let me say, you know, Mike, I don't know about your company, but I can tell you my company is not doing a lot on quantum right now. You know, I wrote a book on it. I'm one of the biggest proponents for it. We still haven't started our quantum journey.
I mean, I'll be honest. This last year, like year and a half, I would say, is the first time I've started. And I do a lot of vendor space stuff, right? Because I go out and do some similar stuff where I try to evangelize for my company. So I do a lot of talks, go do a lot of sales conferences, all that type of stuff. I started seeing all these companies start slowly popping up that are talking about quantum cryptography on the vendor floor. That is the first place I've started seeing people talk about it. But like, why is there a vendor for it? Because that immediately piques my interest. Is like, if there's a vendor for it, there's a reason, and that means there's somebody buying it, right? That means somebody's thinking about it. But as far as like, what are people talking about? If you're asking me what's being talked about on the internet, I mean, under the wave of AI, I don't see a lot of crypto, right? We're all drowning under all this AI stuff, but there's this, like, AI is here. We're dealing with it, right? The biggest threat it does is it automates some things and make us actually probably do a lot more insecure things because we overtrust stuff, right? But nobody's talking about this other big wave of like, hey, quantum cryptography. It could break all of our crypto. All of it. That is like fundamental aspect of application security.
And
right?
the U.S. government has warned that our adversaries are actually sucking our data if they're interested in you, storing it for the day when they can crack it. And so this is not theoretical. NSA has said they're doing it. NIST has said they're doing it. And your competitive adversary potentially could do the same thing. You know, sniff your wireless networks that are protected by RSA and Diffie-Hellman and everything, and wait for the day when they get able to get some time on the Google quantum computer buy it, throw your data in there and decrypt it. And this is what I say. Every company right now, you need to, if you're not making a post-quantum project, you need to let your senior management know about this issue. I've got lots of resources. If you email me at rogerg@knowbefore.com, I got a ton of stuff, a lot of free stuff. I write about it all the time on LinkedIn. But you need to stop what you're doing, tell senior management about this problem, that you need to create a post-quantum project, and at the very least, you need to be doing what's called a cryptographic data protection inventory. You need to be doing an inventory of all your software and hardware that's involved in storing information that you would like to keep protected for 3 or 5 years. Like you need to go, hey, we have this stuff. We'd like to keep it protected from our adversaries 3 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever. And if you're like, yes, well, then you got to make sure that you're updating or replacing the hardware and software and firmware to some. So the first step is just taking an inventory. Where is our data, our critical data, protective data that we want to protect? What is the cryptography that's protecting that? Is it Diffie-Hellman, RSA, AES? What is the current key size? What's the maximum key size? Can I upgrade the algorithm? If all of a sudden I decide that I want to upgrade to Crystal's Kyber, can I do that, right? And that's called crypto agility. You need to start talking to your vendors and going, hey, what are y'all doing for the post-quantum project? And let me tell you what most vendors are going to say. Post-quantum, what are you talking about? So you need to go, yeah, what are you doing for post-quantum cryptography? And so you want to get your vendors moving and thinking. You want your vendors to make their software and hardware crypto agile. Remember that word, crypto agility, crypto agile. And that means that you can replace and move from one cipher to another without having to replace everything. Like with in Windows and stuff and Google stuff, you can actually move from one cryptography to another fairly easy. They're actually more of that on crypto agility. I helped hundreds of people upgrade from SHA-1 to SHA-2. And Microsoft PKI was called Certificate Services. And literally it was uninstalling a cipher, reinstalling a cipher. There's some other steps, but you didn't have to replace it. Well, you're going to have stuff that, like, you're going to have all these programs. The average company has 500 to 1,000 programs. You're going to have this app. You have no idea what its cryptography is. You have some app somebody wrote 10 years ago and they left the company or died. And you have no idea what's in that app, what cryptography is there that's protecting your data. And you need to go to your vendors and say, hey, what are you doing to prepare? Like if all of a sudden the Chinese come out and go, hey, we can read everybody's data, and you're panicking, you need to figure out what is the key stuff. So you need to do this data protection inventory to figure out, okay, what's the stuff that's critical for us to upgrade? Let me talk to the vendor and see, what can I just do, like a software firmware update? What does it look like I'm going to have to replace? What stuff might I have to isolate in such a way that it can't be eavesdropped on? I mean, and that might be a solution you're making today. If you've got critical data that needs to be protected for 10 years, and you think that somebody is going to be motivated to sniffing that and then breaking it at a later date, you need to make sure that it's kept and secured in a way in your network that it can't be sniffed. Because you can't assume just because it's protected today that it'd be protected 5 years from now.
Yeah, I was about to say, it sounds like one of these problems that everyone's going to, and I know it's going to happen, right, is everyone's going to wait till it is a problem, not realizing it's already a problem, right? This is one of those moments, and it kind of keys into what you just said. Like, if I have data that needs to be protected for long term, if I'm not already cryptographically protecting it, it's already exposed, right? We need to, that's the level of reaction you should really be having to this, because if I can just monitor your traffic and eventually once this busts, I have it, right? Like I already have it. It's already too late. So yeah, call to action here. If this isn't even a thing that you were thinking of, you need to start researching this. You need to understand that this is a real problem, and it's going to be a problem that we have no idea when it's going to come up. There's no way for us to predict when that bubble is going to pop.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Y2K, we knew the date, right? And I would say that, a lot of people go, Y2K, nothing happened. No. I was alive. I was an old man. I was helping people prepare. We were going through all the systems, doing inventories, finding out what dates worked. We were setting fake dates and moving stuff around. Like, oh, that's going to need to be replaced. That looks like it's going to be fine. This we're not sure about. We need to watch it after the clock changes or whatever. And Y2K, we didn't have the world come crumbling down because we actually came together only in the last year or two, even though we knew about it for a long time. Most people didn't do anything till the last year or two, and we were able to successfully deal with it. Y2K is the success of global society, kind of like closing the ozone layer. One of the few things where mankind came together, figured it out, solved it before its problem. Yeah, the quantum one is so weird because Q Day or Y2Q Day or whatever they're calling it, you just don't know what that day is going to be. And so the fear is that if everybody moves slow, so the U.S. government say 2030 or whatever, and so if you say 2030, most people aren't even going to be ready then, probably. And the fear is if you have an adversary that is able to access sufficiently capable quantum computers, and it happens before then, well, there's going to be a lot of rushing around. And you as a company, if you're not preparing, you're not talking about this, you're not moving towards this, you're not doing any data protection inventory, there's going to be a lot of companies going to help you do your quantum inventory and preparation and stuff. And let me say there's a lot of companies today that do it. It's going to be more expensive because they're all going to be, all their consultants are going to be checked out on other projects and stuff like that. It is going to be cheaper. You're going to make better decisions if you start thinking about it and moving and doing something today than if you wait till the world gets to panic stage. And I can already tell you, we're going to have Newsweek covers with the Y2K panic. We're going to have movies with Marky Mark in it, flying some jet's going to crash out of the sky or something like that. That's what they did in Y2K. We're going to have the same thing. But it'd be not, if you're one of the companies that heard this today and you're like, I need to look into that, and you start moving on it, you can be someone that when you hear the other people panicking, you already have your plan in place and kind of know what you need to do.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's I have this ominous feeling though that I feel like it's like a cloud over me where like it doesn't matter how many rooftops we get up to and shout it out, there's going to be such a large amount of the public that doesn't embrace it, because most people's security is not a problem until it's a problem, and this is one of those ones. Once it's a problem, it's too late.
And again, I've got lots of free stuff. I can say, if you don't want to buy my book, I got lots of free stuff. I made the practical preparations in a post-quantum world for the Cloud Security Alliance. I've helped write papers at the World Economic Forum and stuff. I'm trying to work even with what do they call themselves? I squared 2? IC squared 2? I don't know. But I'm trying to get on that.
IC squared 2, yeah.
Yeah, I write articles about this all the time. Lots of free stuff. If you reach out to me at Roger Grimes at Roger ROGER at KnowBe4, or you go to my LinkedIn account and follow me there. I've got a ton of stuff on this. It's free. We'll tell you exactly what I've got project plans. I've got PowerPoints. I've got memos you can give the senior management. I've been thinking about this for 20 years. I've got some stuff that can help you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just literally got to make the decision to, hey, I need to start doing something, and there are resources out there for you.
No, that's great advice. And actually, I feel like coming to the end of this conversation, we've been talking about an hour, but one of the things I usually come to the end point. I normally ask people, what's your takeaway? What's the number one piece of advice you can give somebody? I feel it already kind of ringing through on this part. Reach out. Look for these resources. Start with awareness. Just the step one, right? Step one, we usually say inventory. Before you even inventory, awareness. Tell somebody this is a problem. Realize this is a problem and be like, hey, there's this thing that's going to happen. We need to prepare for it. We should start inventorying. Let's just start that process, right? But that awareness part, I feel like there needs to be like I don't know. Is there an OWASP cryptography project that says, hey, we do OWASP Top 10. Everyone listens to it and comes and reads it and uses it for training. Let's make this OWASP cryptography in the era of quantum project, right? I think that's what we need to really drive this home.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And let me say, Mike, part of the problem too is I look at a lot of cryptography curriculums, and they don't have post-quantum in there. So even our trained cryptographers coming out of universities and taking courses and stuff like that, it's kind of new, right? It's just not really hitting stuff. So you don't have a lot of education out there even pushing this here. But I think you're exactly right, is just becoming aware, doing the research. I do think you need to go to senior management. The U.S. government's saying do this, but get some. You need to have senior management give you some support so you can start to spend some time on it, without getting fired, and start to move your company there. And let me tell you, if you start to be the person that helps your company move there, they're going to see you as a valuable resource as this starts to wind up and become something that you absolutely just don't have time to do. You're going to say, oh, we've done this, and we've done this, and we've done this. And they're going to say that you're a valuable person that's good to the organization. That's a great thing to be, than waiting for it to hit you.
And this isn't like ransomware or something where it's going to be like, well, it might not get us, right? This is going to affect everybody, right? This is one of those things where one of the biggest things you do is look at like, hey, what data are we protecting with algorithms that won't do this? Well, what's the impact if this got out? There's your financial reasoning of why this needs to be done. Why this needs to be like that.
Is it all right that your emails, that they can read every email you've ever created? Probably not.
Right. Easy way to drive that point home. All right, Rogers. Hey, this has been a great conversation. Love talking about the crypto space, understanding the quantum impacts of our future. And it's not something nebulous. Like I love the fact that you don't have to understand quantum to prepare for it. You just need to understand that you need to upgrade your cryptography, right? Upgrade using what we have now. You don't have to wait for the breakthrough to be able to do something about it. So reach out to Rogers, get some more information, look at stuff online, look at LinkedIn, and start preparing and having those conversations about that. Hey, Roger, I want to thank you so much for coming in, being a guest, sharing your insights. Also, go pick up Roger's book. He seems to have written a lot about this, obviously knows a lot about this, so take a moment and read that when you get the chance. I want to thank my audience. Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of the Security Champion podcast. And remember, security is a journey, not a destination.